Good to go. All right. All right. You know, one thing, I grew up in Montana, and one thing that I appreciate, well, it's sometimes appreciate but scary, but like when you move to the Midwest, out west we do not have storms like you guys like we have out here in North Dakota and Minnesota. Amen? I mean, that's a storm, right? In Montana, when I was just back in Montana, for Laura and I took a trip back there. That's where I grew up, and boys went to camp, and we needed to get away, so her and I took a little road trip, and it was a great time. But they had a storm one night, and I mean, a few of the trees are just kind of blowing a little bit, right? And there's a few drops of rain, and like, oh, this bad storm coming in, you know? And I'm like, really? You know, like, you guys don't know storms. I'm trying to tell them they don't know storms. I'm like, after a storm in North Dakota, it's like your neighbor has a yard sale with your stuff. You know what I mean? And it's like the tops of the trees have mud on them because they are bending over in the ground. That's how the wind is. And hair doesn't just get messed up in the wind in North Dakota. It just flies right off. Ask my dad. His father had a ton of hair, and I think he just came to North Dakota, and the wind just completely blew it off. In the Midwest, like out in Montana, you know, everyone's like Facebooking and like posting and like, hey, big storm coming in. You know, nobody does that here because we're huddled in the basement just praying for our very lives. Amen? Right? The house is shaking and everything's going on. And most people outside of the Midwest, they just worry about losing a lawn chair or two. We worry about losing buildings and tractors and things, right? Like heavy things and cows and stuff. So I remember our first trampoline we had. This is actually our second trampoline. The first trampoline came from Montana. And out there, we never had any issues with anything like that. I mean, and we never staked it down, no nothing, and it lived, all right? But then brought it to Minnesota, and I realized that this is not a good thing because this could be a sail in one of these storms. So I was smart because I knew better. And so I went and got some stakes, and I stuck it in the ground, and I chained it up on two sides. I'm like, this thing's not coming. One night we had a tornado. Actually, it was one that touched down there, actually formed over our house, and it's like crazy. And we're all huddled in the basement, and it was like a walkout basement, and you could see this trampoline like just trying to just pull itself off the ground. And I wasn't too smart because the next morning when I went out there, you always have that fresh, storm smell when you come out, and then you see that the complete trampoline was folded like a taco. And there wasn't much left of it, but just folded up. I tried to weld it. It didn't really work. Neighbors thought I was crazy, but I was cheap, and I tried to weld it. But it folded like a taco. So this is number 2 trampoline. And I have 4 stakes on it this time. I got smart. So I stuck it down with 4 stakes, and then, of course, another storm came through, and that tree right there, a big branch fell on it and hurt it. So it didn't blow away, but it got hurt by the other things that are happening. So here's where I'm going to be honest with you. Tonight, Jesus, we're going to talk about storms tonight because Jesus, I love how honest he is about life, okay? There's two things this side of heaven that Jesus is going to be honest with us about. Number 1 is that storms of life will come. Okay, we're not talking about physical storms, which they will come, but storms of life will come. And it may be a calm in your life and things might be going well, and a storm can happen just like that. An accident, your health, something can happen to you, and a storm can hit you just like that. And Jesus is being honest with us, and he's going to finish up this Sermon on the Mount series and be really honest with you. The second thing is, and this is the one we always forget, that if you've been through a really horrific storm, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be another one down the road. Because so often we think like we hit this big storm in life and we get through it and we're like, okay, God, I learned so much. And you look back and all of a sudden there's another storm, and that's even worse because you're like, God, I just went through one and now you're going to bring me another one. And if you know life, it seems like it always happens in 3. So sometimes there's 3 storms up ahead or 2 storms ahead of you. And see, as Christians, a lot of times we go, okay, I know, John, storms can happen. I get through one, but then that second one comes, and it's tough to deal with. And that's why Jesus is going to finish up the Sermon on the Mount with this. Some live to try to find this perfect place to avoid a storm. Okay? He's not teaching us how to avoid a storm. He's saying that they're going to come, but it's what you do and what you do with that storm that matters. But people like to kind of try to avoid them. And the only problem is that they tend to move to areas where it's very tropical, because where's the nice weather located at? Tropical, always by a beach, right? So we go down to San Diego, it's 70 degrees all year long. I could handle that. Amen? Praise the Lord. I could suffer for Jesus. I've been praying for years for a beach ministry, and he's never given it to me. In college, they went around the room, in our ministry department. They were like, what were you guys going to do after college? And some like, I'm going to seminary, and I will study 18 hours a day the Word of God in Greek and Hebrew. And they'd kind of go down there. I went, yeah, I'm just praying for a beach ministry. Someone's got to minister to the surfers. It's but the beach is not immune to storms, are they? And in fact, some of the tropical storms that hit the most mild climates of the world are the most violent and the most deadly. I remember going to Cancun after one of the hurricanes went through there, and actually this resort didn't have any sand left. They were actually having to take semi-trucks and truck in sand for the resort that's on the ocean, because the storm was that severe and violent that it just took even the sand away, and buildings and all this stuff. Storms are going to come. The secret isn't trying to avoid the storm, it's trying to get through the storm. And yet we all want to avoid it. And that's sometimes how we just live, in this fear of trying to avoid the next bad thing that's going to happen. But the reality is it's Jesus saying they're going to come, and I'm going to teach you how to get through them, not around them. Back in Montana, it was interesting. There was three situations where I saw people facing incredible storms. Just a huge reminder. Really good friends of ours, their oldest son was 18 years old. He was turning 18 in 2 days. And he was out in Oregon. He was coming back across the Oregon passes through the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, and he was coming back home for his 18th birthday party that his family was going to throw for him. Great Christian people. And they were coming down the mountain passes, and they overcorrected on one of the corners, and there was a logging truck that met him head on, and he was killed instantly 2 days before his birthday. And I was able to go to the funeral. It was a kid that I remember being baptized. I remember him making a decision for Christ. He's in heaven, he's in glory, but the incredible storm that his parents are facing right now, it's horrific. Also encountered my friend Mandy. She grew up in our church back in Montana. And Mandy's dad was one of our leaders. They were with my dad's church, but then when I took over the church, he actually became one of our trustees, one of our leaders. She married one of my good friends in high school, who was also on the basketball team, as the captain of our basketball team. And so him and I played ball for years and years and years together. And those who got together, they had 4 children. They came to our church out there. And she was actually raised by her father, and he passed away. And it was a horrific thing, because she was so close to her dad. He was a leader in the church. And that was a horrific thing. But then a couple months later, her husband, who was 40 years old, passed away too. And not only that, is that they lost their home. He lost his job prior, and the bank foreclosed on their home. And she has 4 children and some pets and living with friends, and lost her dad, who raised her, and her husband, who helped her raise these children. And the storms keep coming. My heart broke. Went and visited, actually she's a part of Recharge Church, and you guys have never even met her. Her name is Esther Mead. And Esther, she watches Recharge Church videos every single night. Because Esther Mead is in a bed, and she can't get out of bed. And she has no church. And she's at the last part of her life where she's saying, John, I have no really purpose. I said, yes, you do. I said, your prayers for our church and for me, I need them. You have purpose there. She considers this her church, and she lives in Missoula, Montana. And I walked in on her. I didn't tell her I was coming, and I just walked in on her room, and I was like, one of those moments where you're like, oh no, I'm just going to surprise. This is a good idea. And then when you're in that moment, you're like, whoa, I think I just killed her. Not a good idea. because I thought she was going to have a heart attack. She started shaking. She's like, is that you? She was like sleeping, came out, and I had a whole stack of DVDs because I was behind, and I handed her. So I said, I was going to mail these. I thought I'd hand deliver them this time. Wonderful, wonderful lady. Her and her husband, I had the privilege of leading to the Lord at age 75 when they first gave their hearts to Christ. And she's laying in the bed. She's looking at me with tears in her eyes and saying, thank you. We're going to be in heaven again together because of the work of the Lord. She's living a storm. I mean, you have a story. There's so many people that have the stories of storms in life. I have those stories. And I'm so glad that Jesus ends this Sermon on the Mount with just being real and honest. And let's read it together. It should be on your little sheets, your little song sheets if you still have them. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 29. And we're ending this epic journey that we've been on, Sermon on the Mount. You guys all there? All right. Let's read. It says, therefore, and this is, I want you guys to read this like you're reading it for the first time, okay? I know we've heard this in Sunday school so many times. We've sang the songs, but let's read it like the first time. Therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine, all these things that we've been talking about for weeks and weeks, and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And when the rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But anyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against the house and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. Man, I would have loved to have been at the Sermon on the Mount. Amen? I mean, like, to hear Jesus say the words that we've worked 30 parts to this, 30 Sundays we've gone through, almost a half a year we've gone through this sermon. But can you imagine being there? And I guarantee you the people that were there, they'd fallen asleep many, many times with the scribes, right? Go to the temple and, we're in Deuteronomy again. Thought we were done with that book. And then moving on, and yet they were at the edge of their seat. He said when he finished this, they were amazed. They were on the edge of their seat going, wow, he has authority. Y'all remember the Sunday school song? Any kids know it? The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the... You guys remember this story? It's the song. Do we need to sing it? And the rains came tumbling down. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down. And then I loved it when my mom she'd lead us and and the house went splat when they were on the sand, right? So he's saying, hey, the wise person builds it on a solid rock foundation. But not on this stuff over here. This sand stuff is pretty unstable. Great for sand volleyball, by the way. But not very good to build a house on. Now, in this story, there are two builders. Okay, there are two characters here. There's two builders. There's two different types of builders. There are two houses. There are two locations. One's on a rock, one's in the sand, and there's one storm. It doesn't say if a storm comes. It's when the storm comes. This is what happens to the two houses. And they both experience a storm. In verse 25 and verse 27, they both experience storms, which Jesus is not telling us how to avoid storms. Okay, this is something we're not getting in the whole picture of Christianity. He's not telling us how to avoid them. He's not telling us how to make life this smooth transition. He says they're going to come. And I want to tell you that these are going to come, and these storms in life are going to shake your house. They're going to beat down rain. They're going to freak you out of your mind. They're going to make you feel scared. They're going to come at you from out of the blue. And this is how you get through it. This is how you live through it. The builders did the same work. They used the same materials, and there's the same storm, except the builder number one, he heard some good advice from the master carpenter to build on a rock. And not only did he hear it, he did it. But the other builder heard the same thing, because it says that these are people that heard this message of Jesus Christ. These are the people that have heard it. And the other builder, number 2, heard that it'd be a good idea. The master carpenter says, I think you should build it on a solid rock foundation. And he's like, no. I love the beach. Who doesn't? Right? Who doesn't? I'm going to build there, close to the ocean. And in fact, the property is way more expensive closer to the ocean. It's a better investment. Rock is much harder. It takes more effort to build on top of rock than it does by the beach. You have to haul things further. You have to anchor into the rock. That takes effort, okay? And it's not comfortable. How many of you have ever slept on a rock? Anybody backpack and sleep on a rock? You guys weren't smart enough to move the rock? I remember one time my family, we went backpacking as a family. We went up to Heart Lake and Montana. And it's a beautiful spot. And so the girls had the little tent, and my dad and I were going to, we're men. We're just going to tarp it, sleep under a little tarp. And it was in this canyon, just a beautiful spot, awesome lake. And we had a great night, and we all just kind of bunked in for the night. And this storm of epic proportions, I thought there was an ark close by. It was like, and of course, we're like right in the ravine and all these huge peaks. So all the water running off of there is going to go where? Right here to the lake. And we're between that and the lake, and the water came like crazy. And it was a disaster. The lightning's coming. We're freaking out. And where should we go? And so I remember there's this little rock cave, because there was a bunch of rocks that had fallen down. There's this little cave, because I was exploring around. I'm like, let's go to the rock cave because it's dry under there. But we went in, and this big rock that had fallen, there's a little cave, and our whole family just like snuck under there, and we just huddled up underneath stuff and what we could ever take. And I remember we never slept a wink, because you're sleeping on a rock, and you're cold. It's not comfortable. And so sometimes we avoid building our lives upon the rock of Jesus Christ because it's not comfortable, because it takes effort, because it's not what the world wants. It's not what they're down here on the beach. And beach houses are awesome. If you've ever been to the beach, I love the ocean. I always thought I was going to be a surfer, and so my buddy takes me out surfing. And we're out there in the waves, and I'm kind of catching on. And then all of a sudden, we're just waiting for some breakers to come, and there is a massive fish that jumps out right in front of my board. I'm just like, wow! And he's like, oh, no, don't worry about that, John. He goes, you know why he's jumping? He goes, I'm like, why? Why did he just jump out of the water? He goes, because there's a bigger one chasing it. I'm in. I'm good. North Dakota, right in the middle of we're good. The beach has sun and surf and sand. And it's relaxed, because who wants to lay on a rock versus laying in the sand? Wouldn't you rather lay in the sand, kids, than a rock? Yeah. It's easier. Yeah. It's more comfortable sitting in the sun. But we risk too much being by the ocean. If you've seen those tsunamis that come, those storms that can come, even on a clear day, it's a scary place, because the storms will come. And he says, put these into practice. If those who put these words into practice of mine is like, if you listen to what Christ is saying throughout this whole series, if you have not been with us for this, there's 29 other parts that Jesus has been teaching us up to this point. Remember the Beatitudes. Jesus started out this sermon saying, blessed are the poor in spirit who are humble. It's not about you, it's about him. Blessed are those that are mourning. Blessed are the meek. Page turn. Blessed are those that hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are those that are merciful. Blessed those that are pure at heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Remember the thermostat versus thermometer. Bless those that are being persecuted. I mean, Jesus has given us stuff that doesn't seem like the world would want to do. It doesn't seem comfortable. And then remember, he talked about the diseased heart. Jesus was talking about the diseased heart. He said, listen up. This is how you should live. You have a diseased heart. There's a diseased heart. That's what the problem with your life and with everybody. And he says, you've heard it say that thou shalt not murder. But he said, I'll tell you what the disease is. The disease is anger. And if you have anger in your heart, it's no different than murder. Remember that? The root is the same. And he says, you got to deal with the root. He said, you hear, thou shalt not commit adultery. But he says, the root of that is lust. And if you look at a woman lustfully, you have committed adultery in your heart. And so therefore, it's the root that matters. And he also said about divorce, the source is hardness. He talked about lies, a divided heart, and about revenge, and about our enemies. He talked about all these things that come from these diseased stuff in our heart. And he says, you got to get it clean. And then he gave us a bunch of stuff on what healthy hearts do. And that's what we've been looking at. Healthy hearts give, and they pray, and they fast, and they forgive. That are in tune with God. They're worry-free. They do not judge. They ask, seek, and they knock. There's a narrow gate where those come through. Remember the narrow gate? And they produce good fruit, like we looked at 2 weeks ago. And tonight, he's talking about the heart that builds and listens and builds their life on solid foundation in Jesus Christ is everything. And I love that he chose to use the word practice. You know? Like when you go to the doctor, I always love when they say practicing medicine, right? Because that's kind of what they do. They just kind of practice on you, and hopefully something works. But he says, I want you to put this into practice, okay? He's not asking for perfection. We covered a lot of things, and we could have, you know, he's not talking about perfection. He's saying, but I want you to step out. I want you to start building on this foundation. Start building your house. There's going to be things that are wrong with your house. And in fact, a storm may come and it might blow out a window or two. But he's saying, I want you to just to try to put it into practice. Not just to hear it, but to do it. Man, as we close this up, as I've been kind of reflecting back on this series, this has been an incredible journey. I've been a pastor since 22 years old. I'm 40, so do the math. And I've preached a lot of sermons. I've preached a lot of series. I've done some crazy series. We did a series on the book of Luke called The Lukes of Hazzard. And we restored a General Lee from ground up and called it the Man of Galilee. And we took this car out of the weeds as Christ wants to rebuild our heart, and we put it into a showroom, and we had to insure it for over $100,000 because it was that amazing. I've done amazing, even here, we've done some amazing series where God has really spoken to us, and we've walked through some pretty crazy things. But man, I have never had a series where God has made me live every word that I've had to preach. And as a pastor, it's like the hardest part is I have to practice what I preach. It's so much easier telling you guys how to do it. You know what I mean? It's so much easier to say, no, this is what you guys need to do, because I'm the pastor. I'm up on this little cool platform here. You guys need this, not me. And I'm telling you what, there's never been a series where Christ has made me literally walk every word and every nuance and every point. Jesus had to make me live it, and that's what he wants us to do. He wants us to live it. This series has changed me. And I don't know if it's changed you, but I'm humbled by what Jesus is sharing through his word. 2 series before this, we did Second Chance Faith. And man, it was kind of, I've been working through a lot of that. It was kind of like a series out of my devotional book for the last 5 years of the journey that Heather and I had been on through this second chance in marriage and life and ministry. And I even was able to finish my CD of this Second Chance Faith. And just, it was this major storm that we'd been through, and it was kind of this celebration of going, okay, God, you brought me through this because you're the God of the second chance. And then we moved into the next series, which was The Best Is Yet to Come. Do you guys remember that in Philippians? The best is yet to come. Because it was so awesome, because, you know, it was kind of like after, if you've ever been down to the areas that have been hit by hurricanes, it's kind of like the aftermath of that and the rebuilding process. And it was like it was second chance faith. It was kind of this rebuilding process from this hurricane that we'd experienced in our family and our lives, and it kind of intersected. And then God brought me to this Philippians book, and it was like, oh, the best is yet to come. And you step out because you're like, man, we've rebuilt from this horrific storm, and now we're waiting for just the sunshine. And that's where God brought us to this series, which I didn't anticipate would be in the midst of that, I'd have to face the biggest storm of my life. And it's hard because when you come through a storm, a big storm, you think that you're immune to the next storm, and you're not. And so I saw my life as trying to pattern all this stuff to get to my place where I don't have to experience storms anymore. And I started to realize that I was trying to avoid them, but Christ was trying to teach me how to live through them. And I hope he was teaching you how to live through them as well. I thought I knew humility over the last 5 years until I came to the Beatitudes. And each week, he would nail us, right? I mean, there was some intense, if you go back, there's some intense stuff going on of breaking it down and saying, okay, God, wow, it is all about you. It has nothing to do with me. It is about you. And then we came to this point. I thought I knew stuff in my heart that I had to deal with of diseases until God started doing surgery with those things in the heart, right? And then I thought I knew health until the storm came. I thought I had a healthy heart until the storm came, and then it shakes the ground, and the house starts shaking. And we started this series the first week after I turned 40. That was back in October, 9 months ago. I had no idea that I'd be standing here on a deck finishing the series when I had it in mind. I just knew that God was calling us to walk it and to live it. 9 months ago, my kids were doing well. Our church was doing well. I finished my CD, The Second Chance Faith. Brian White came along during this series, remember, and he encouraged our hearts. Had a great Christmas program. The kids were amazing. My wife Heather was in full-time in school, and life was good. I remember at Christmas time and laying in bed and just Heather having a conversation that, man, I feel like I'm healing. I feel like I've healed so much, and I feel so good about where I'm at with school and with you and with the kids and church and life. And then a few months later, the tornado came through our home and destroyed it. It's over. Heather moved out. She couldn't get past the past hurts and the last storm. Now there's new hurt with me and my kids, and we're in the process of divorce and the hours of tears and heartache. And so as I'm sifting through what's left of the wreckage of my home and my family, you never notice the foundation of a home until the building's removed. You know that? You never notice the house. You only see the house when it's standing, but you don't really notice its foundation. That's not what your eye gets attracted to until the house is gone. And so when you're sorting through rubble, you realize something. Either your foundation is super strong, or the foundation was the reason why the house fell. I remember after Katrina, we actually helped the church rebuild. There was a church in Cameron, Louisiana that actually just was wiped off the map. But the foundation wasn't. And in fact, they didn't have to redo the foundation. In fact, we took crews down there and we raised thousands of dollars so they could build the church on the same foundation. And so, friends, it doesn't matter what storm comes through or what wreckage happens in your life. All that matters is how firm your foundation is And I'll tell you what, as I look around, I'm thankful that my foundation is in Jesus Christ. And I know that he will rebuild on that foundation. In the midst of it, when the storms hit and there's damage, you can't help but hurt. You can't help but feel. You can't help but question God. You can't help but say, why? Why did it have to come through here? Why did that tornado have to take this house out? Why did it have to take this place? But it's not trying to avoid it. It's trying to say, how do we get through it? How do we rebuild when the storms of life maybe take the house out? Or maybe they just knocks the windows out in your life. Or whatever happens. How do we get through that? And as you sift through the rubble and the loss, you feel loss, and that's part of it, and it's okay, and Jesus knows that. And it's not our job to try to avoid that. It's trying to say, he's going to be there for you. He's like, those that listen to my words and build on this foundation of me, if you trust in me, no matter what happens. He's trying to level with them, and you can see they're on the edge of their seat. They're going, okay, these are the last words of his sermon, and he's saying, listen to me. Listen. Some of you guys are going to face horrific things, but put your foundation in me. And I guarantee you, even if you have to rebuild 3 times over, the foundation will stay. And it can be anchored in eternity. There are many hard things that my family has to face, and splitting things up, and it's just horrible. A couple weeks ago, Heather took the Martin guitar. It's a Martin D28 1973. It's her grandfather's. It's an heirloom, and it's hers. And I've played on it for many, many, many years. It was hard. I know it's kind of weird. If you're a musician, you'll get it. Because this guitar and we've been through a lot. It's a most amazing guitar. Rosewood back. Greatest tone ever. 1973 vintage, and it's amazing. I actually, I had it, and I was going to have Brian White play it, and he didn't want to play it because it was so nice. It's the one I lead. It doesn't look nice because of the cracks and stuff, but the tone and how it was made, they don't make them like this anymore. And in fact, some of the wood in it you can't even get, and if I travel overseas, it'll get confiscated because it's exotic wood. I've written about 90% of the songs, and hundreds of songs that I've written about 90% on this Martin D28. It's been to Nashville quite a few times, and it's been in the studio numerous times. I've led thousands of songs in worship to thousands of people over the years with this guitar. I've strummed it 10,000 times or more. It's traveled to more states than most people have traveled. And in fact, when we travel with it, I have an aircraft case that it goes in, because to protect it. And you have to unstring the strings because the altitude and stuff like that, it can warp the instrument. And so you have to detune them. And one time we were rushing to Nashville, and I threw it in there, and I was on the gate, and I see him load it. I'm looking through the window. I'm seeing him load this guitar, and I go, I didn't unwind the strings, and I freaked out. And so I had to go to the people, and they're getting me on the radio. I'm like, he has to do this. That thing cannot get on this plane. And so I'm walking this guy with the headphones, and the landing plane guys with the vest, and he's out there detuning this thing because I didn't want to, ruin this guitar. Lots of stories. The whole top is actually tear-stained from tears that I've cried through worship and life and storms. God has spoken to me many times with that instrument in my hand. That instrument is played to comfort people at many funerals. I wrote a song hours before I had to do a double suicide for kids, teenagers, when the whole school was there, and I was out there just worshiping, go, God, give me something. And he gave me a song. And I was able to share it just moments after that to people, and hundreds of kids gave their heart to Jesus Christ. I played it to celebrate weddings. I've led thousands in worship to the throne of God. I've brought it to deliverances when we've had people that were possessed by demons, and I've led worship, and these demons were fleeing from these people, and they found freedom, and they were able to worship with us. The guitar was there. It's played many, many, many songs after many, many sermons that I've preached. And there's been many, many people give their heart to Christ and come to the altar when that guitar was being played. There was one particular time in Washington when we started leading worship, and the Spirit of God showed up so heavily, we didn't even say a word. People were coming forward to the altar and giving their lives to Jesus Christ. That guitar was leading the way. A guitar played after all my kids were born as I wrote them a song and played for their dedications and dedicating their lives to the Lord. So it was hard to give up. So I just felt like God was telling me to go to Montana and just to get away. I've been kind of locked up trying to, I couldn't even make decisions. I think Marcia would talk to me about how many sweatshirts should we order for this next series, and we're going to have sweatshirts, by the way. And I'm like, I just locked up. I couldn't make a decision. The only decision I made was to get me and Lauren in a car and drive to Montana. And I just needed to get in the mountains. And so I was going into Bozeman, Montana, and the Lord said, just go to the Gibson factory. I'm a huge Gibson fan, and all my electric guitars are Gibson. I've always wanted a Gibson acoustic. And the Gibson acoustic factory is in Bozeman, Montana. And they're all handmade instruments. They're amazing. And God told me to go there. They weren't giving I was like, I want to take a factory tour. They weren't giving factory tours. And so I'm like, well, yeah, I'm just wanting to get close to a Gibson right now. And the lady's like, well, here, go downtown. There's a little showcase. Tell them that I sent you. So I go downtown to the shop, and I said, well, Sharon sent me down, and he takes me in this room, and he asked me, and I kind of tell him the story about my D28. And he was a musician. He could understand. He's like, I get it, man. And I told him the kind of sound that I like, and I love the Martin, but I've always wanted the crunchier mids and the cleaner bass and of the Gibson. And so he hands me this guitar, and Lauren was with me, and I fell in love. It was one strum, and it was amazing. The tone was exactly what I've always wanted, and so much better than a D28. So this is the love of my life. Her name's Charlie. We're in relationship. And I strummed it, and I'm like, wow. And it's not the instrument that writes the song, it's the heart. It's the foundation. Instrument's what sets up on top of the foundation. And when our foundation is in Him, and the instrument goes away, as long as you have the song in your heart, He'll keep putting it through a beautiful instrument. And He will give you more than you've asked for.
Sitting on the back porch, finally home, sipping on a nice tea, sugar and a little foam. It smells like summer, no sign of rain, new strings and a guitar, and strumming it out again. They say that the dark night only lasts for long. The harmony will come back when you wait for a song. Just keep on singing, even if it's out of tune. Then just sit back here and watch what God will do. 'Cause there's a new road, there's a new plan, there's a new song, and there's a new dance. Oh, there's a new life. Oh, when the old dies, there's a new day. When dawn breaks through your skies, dawn breaks through your skies. I know it doesn't help now to say I'll be alright when facing misery and a future that isn't bright. All I can offer is one step at a time, and the road you go down will somehow show a sign. 'Cause there's a new road, there's a new plan, there's a new song, and there's a new dance. Oh, there's a new life. Oh, when the old dies, there's a new day. When dawn breaks through your skies, oh, dawn breaks through your skies. Oh, every tear will be erased, and every note will find its place. Melodies come from above. So if you listen in this space, you will faintly hear its grace. A tune born out of love. And there's a new road, there's a new plan, there's a new song, and there's a new dance. There's a new life. When the old dies, there's a new day. When dawn breaks through your skies, and dawn breaks through your skies. Ooh, dawn breaks through your skies.